Hey there, U.S. history peeps. I'm Cassandra Rodriguez.
And I'm Ann Lane, and this is our end of the year summative project units 1 through 9, theme 6.
Let's get to it!
Theme 6, Geography and the Environment. This theme focuses on the role of geography and both the natural and human-made environments on social and political developments in what would become the United States.
For the periodization shift, we decided to switch Period 8, which was originally from 1945 to 1980, to 1945 to 1970. We felt this was the most appropriate shift because 1970 was the year of the first Earth Day. This marks a major turning point in our theme, which focuses on the role of geography and both the natural and human-made environments on social political developments in what would become the United States. The first Earth Day brings about a major increase in awareness of the environmental concerns that plague the nation, such as pollution in particular. This evidenced by the 20 million people who participated in the first day dedicated to the environment. While previously there was not as many acts that considered environmental protections prior to 1970, but after 1971 and 1972, certain acts such as the Clean Air and Water Act show the dramatic impact of the day. The Clean Air and Water Act were implemented under Nixon's presidency. Unit 1 is from 1491 to 1607. A continuity was that throughout the time period 1491 to 1607, predominantly depending on what region particular tribes were in, they tended to develop a particular lifestyle to accommodate to the geography, as well as the environment. In the Great Basin, as well as the Great Plains, they had a typically arid climate, which led to a mobile lifestyle within that region. This shows that their environment dictated what lifestyles the tribes had to utilize for their benefit. A change was before the Spaniards in the 16th century were focused on mining gold and silver throughout the Americas and making a quick profit. Later, the Spaniards focused on hopes of creating a profitable agricultural economy and hoped to establish elements of European civilizations in America which permanently alter the landscape.
Unit 1, Continuity. In the southwestern part of the U.S., there was great emphasis on agriculture in the region, such as maize, corn, but in the Great Plains area there was animal hunting, like that of buffalo, which was the strongest use of the land for food in this region, and this pattern would continue throughout the unit until 1607. Change. Europeans would begin creating permanent settlements in the Americas, such as the Spanish in 1565, with the first European settlement in St. Augustine, Florida, and the English with Roanoke in 1590, which was a change from previous times where the Europeans went to the Americas only to obtain items they believed would enhance their wealth, such as silver and other precious metals.
For Unit 2, a continuity was from 1607 to 1754. Depending on the geographical location of the colonists, different crops were developed that were suitable for their climates. In the north, there was colder weather and rockier soil than in the south. Therefore, it was difficult to have large-scale commercial farming. While the south had fertile and temperate weather, they had an agricultural-based economy and could utilize crops such as tobacco. This evidences how, throughout the time period, geography and climate dictated the possible crops and systems that would be most suitable for the area. A change was that the plantation emerges in the 1660s, typically in the Chesapeake region due to their fertile soil, which leads to self-contained communities due to the distant location from the cities.
As a continuity after 1676 with Bacon's Rebellion and the emergence of tobacco in the South, Southern plantation owners would begin to use African Americans as slaves and expand their land in the South due to more slaves being used for easier cultivation and work for tobacco. As a change, at the founding of Jamestown, the English counted on the natives for cultivation and soon saw that wouldn't be something they could depend on. So John Rolfe would begin to experiment with tobacco in 1612, and this would spread up and down the Jamestown colony.
For Unit 3, a continuity from 1754 to 1800 was depending on the environment of the region, different labor forms were required for the specific area. In the Chesapeake region, it was hot and tobacco cultivation was grueling work. Therefore, slavery was increasingly utilized due to this climate. A change was in 1793, the cotton gin by Eli Whitney helped the New England region since they could not thrive on agriculture alone, since their climate and geography was not suited for agricultural activities, so it helped the North develop a textile industry.
As a continuity for Unit 3, from the beginning of 1754, colonists have been expanding into more U.S. territory, and this continues after the French and Indian War as well as the Land Ordinance of 1785, with the allowance of expansion across the Appalachian Mountains into the west. Even with obstacles such as the Proclamation Line of 1763, colonists would still expand further. A change. From 1754, the British had allowed colonists to expand as far as they pleased, but after the French and Indian War, there would be the Proclamation Line of 1763, which worked to stop colonization across the Appalachian Mountains, which was a new political development working against colonist expansion in the Western Territory.
Unit 4 is from the years 1800 to 1848. A continuity was that from 1800 to 1848, we see cotton beginning to take over the southern economy, although it does spike particularly in the 1820s, since the cultivation of tobacco significantly exhausts the land. We see that overall, depending on the region, certain crops are utilized which are best acclimated to the climate. For example, we can see evidence in Florida and Georgia that they have higher rainfalls, which leads to rice being a staple in their environments, since rice heavily demanded high amounts of water and irrigation. A change was, since the North had rocky soil and a shorter growing season, agriculture is not the primary choice. So, in the 1820s, we see the rise of the factory. Machines that were driven by water power began to dominate in the North, since rivers were in a higher concentration. These machines lead to a dramatic textile industry increase.
Unit 4, there would be continued expansion into the west, which would allow for progress in the region, with the cotton gin allowing for easier cotton cultivation and due to the natives no longer being a threat after the War of 1812. The first Western president, Andrew Jackson, would emerge, and this would also be evidence of an expanding and progressing Western society. A change would be with the European immigrants from the 1820s to 1840s, who usually moved to urban areas such as the Northeast, but the German immigrants during the time period decided to move northwest to farm and are known for the Rhine district, which is known to have meat packing due to animal resources in the area.
Unit 5 begins in 1844 and ends in 1877. A continuity was that throughout the time period 1844 to 1877, there was a shift to the west because of the geographical as well as the environmental factors that made it appealing. The west had an abundance of natural resources, such as lakes and rivers, as well as gold and silver. This sparks multiple events such as the gold rush, which leads many individuals to the West Coast in search of these natural resources and riches. A change was that a new defense of nature emerges by transcendentalists to protect the natural geographical beauties in order to prevent harm by miners, which were continuously utilizing the region to extract natural riches. By continuously, I don't mean a continuity. And this is a shift of the previous thought of seeing natural resources and geography as purely economical rather than some sort of beauty.
Unit 5, Continuity. The idea of manifest destiny, which is that it's God's given right to move from coast to coast, is continued throughout the time period with Oregon's 5440 or fight to receive more land, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which gave the U.S. extra square miles, and the Gadsden Purchase, which is modern-day southern Arizona. A change, the North and South would change in handling of their land. The North would have the Homestead Act, which gave 160 acres of land to a person for a small fee after 5 years, and the Morrill Land Grant Act, which also gave land in support of education. The South would use sharecropping, which allowed Southerners to rent land and pay for the land through crops that were grown on the land.
Unit 6 begins in 1865 and ends in 1898. A continuity was that throughout the time period there was a search for natural resources and an increase in mining, which leads to the emergence of boom towns in the mineral-rich regions of the mountains and plateaus. This also leads to certain ghost towns after people leave these towns when there is no more of the natural riches to extract. A change was that as individuals became more infatuated with nature as well as as well as its beauty with the allure of the West, there is a rapid expansion in tourism in the 1880s and 1890s, especially to the Great Plains and Rocky Mountains to see these geographical beauties. Before, people were not as interested in environmental or geographical wonders.
Unit 6, a continuity. The sharecropping system would continue to be utilized throughout the unit due to the southern economy moving very slowly and good land for agriculture because of rich soil and climate, as well as the ongoing racist environment of the South that restricted many African Americans from other ways of living. A change. Violence in the West between white Americans and natives would change from physically hurting each other in altercations into the decimation of the buffalo in the West in order to hurt the natives so their source of food would drop and leave the natives weakened.
Unit 7 is from 1890 to 1945, and a continuity was that throughout the time period, environmental degradation began to spread with the rise of cities and rapid urbanization such as air pollution as well as fires. There was a fire in 1906 in San Francisco and Baltimore. Factories tended to pollute the air significantly. A change was the environment of the United States brought about conservationists and preservationists, which support national park establishment. Teddy Roosevelt was the first president with active interest in new and struggling American conservation movement, and he greatly expands the national park network. 1902, the president backs up the New Lands Act, which gave federal funds for canals and dams.
Unit 7, Continuity. Increasing productivity in the West in population and farmland due to the New Deal program that gave most support to the West with the creation of great dams and power stations because the area was best suited for such works with open land and the government with lots of control over the area. A change. During the Great Depression, farming would decline due to a drought in the Great Plains known as the Dust Bowl, and this would affect the surrounding society by increasing homelessness and malnutrition.
Unit 8 is where we made the cut for our periodization shift to 1970. And a continuity that we chose from 1945 to 1970 was that for most of the time period, there was a surge on vacation travel, most visible in America's national parks. People began to travel in order to hike or camp, fish and hunt, and others to simply gawk at the landscape. This surge translates into fights to preserve certain environmental and geographical areas, particularly Echo Park. Also, the Sierra Club emerges once again and remains a major force throughout the time period. A change for this time period was, with regards to the environment with new human-made environments, was the emergence of levee towns in the 1960s and the mass movement to suburbs. These emerged due to more open terrain farther away from cities, which attracted individuals to move there to escape the pollution of the cities.
Unit 8, Continuity. From the beginning of the time period, late 1940s, environmentalism, known as the new science of ecology, would grow with environmentalists doubling and working to maintain the balance in nature, such as Aldo Leopold, who would publish the Sand County Almanac in 1949 that stated it was humans' responsibility to maintain nature, and Rachel Carson with Silent Spring published in 1962, speaking of the dangers of DDT released into the environment, which gained a lot of support. Change. New growth in the use of highways due to the Federal Highway Act of 1956 was one of the greatest altercations to the national landscape, which would create the rapid growth in edge cities on the outside of urban areas because of manufacturers being able to move out of main cities into more rural areas for cheap land.
Unit 9 is the unit that we did our periodization shift beginning at 10 years earlier at 1970, which now the years are 1970 to present. So, a continuity was the environmental movement sees continuous expansion, particularly after the first Earth Day in 1970, and continues to the present day. We also see the emergence of the Environmental Protection Agency in 1970, as well as the Clean Air and Water Acts in 1971 and 1972, respectively. These all evidence the continuous expansion throughout the time period of environmental concerns. A change was a new challenge emerges in 1980, which is global warming, a steady rise in the Earth's atmosphere from fossil fuel emissions, particularly coal and oil. Previously, the issue surrounding the environmental movement was water pollution, which had an unpleasant sight as well as odor, which garnered health risks in 1950. In 1950, the Cayuga River burst in flames due to petroleum waste being dumped in. Now, global warming was the center, and it leads to political initiatives such as the Kyoto Treaty.
Unit 9, Continuity. Prosperity in the Sunbelt region would increase with population due heavily to climate and technological industries that expanded in the region in places such as Silicon Valley. Change. Suburban conservatism would emerge within the Sunbelt. The new right would have many of its members in militant conservative areas such as Orange County, California, that insulated its residents from other diverse groups, increasing conservative power in the area.
Now, for a quick recap. The key points: the Great Basin and Great Plains had arid regions, therefore, they had mobile lifestyles.
Tobacco is better for the South due to fertile soil.
The Cotton Gin by Eli Whitney helps North develop a textile industry.
German immigrants moved to Northeast region known as Rhine District.
Want of natural resources sparks major movement to the West, particularly climate.
Expansion of tourism to see the West, the allure of the West.
The New Deal supports the West with programs such as the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Surge of vacation travel to national parks.
And finally, the Sun Belt region emerges with conservatism, the key political force. We know that Theme 6, geography and the environment, isn't the greatest factor of American growth in history, but it is a very important part of our nation's past. That helps develop the United States into what it is today. So, good luck on your APs!